Welcome, everybody. We're going to give it a few moments for some people to kind of join us as we are in our second rendition of Live with Destiny Shaper, Miss Patricia Plummer. How are you today?
I am doing fantastic. Thank you,
That's
Damien.
awesome. Awesome.
Thank
To
you.
God be the glory. While we're waiting for some people to come online, what's really been on your mind? We were discussing a little bit earlier some of the things that you were thinking about today, especially with your culture and some of the stuff that's been happening. So just kind of, while we're waiting for some people.
It's been on my mind for a while about when we're raising little people, how do we want to show up in their lives? And it's just been something that I go to bed with, I get up with, and it's with me night and day. And I'm grateful to God because He's allowed me to obviously go through a lot in terms of my childhood and then my young adult, and then being married at 20. What are some of the challenges I had to deal with? And like I stated in the last video, is that I'm not in my story, I'm standing on my story. And I love that because God is faithful, and whomever I want to make sure that everyone feel love and welcome, no judgment, no pointing finger, no shaming, any of those things, because we're in this journey together, and we're more alike than we're different. It doesn't matter what country, how you were brought up, we're more alike than we're different. And so I want to be able to encourage us along this journey to say, how do we show up? Are we showing up consciously or unconsciously, emotionally, relationally, psychologically, spiritually, mentally? How do we show up so that we can show up with our best self?
Wow. Tell us a little bit about you. What's your nationality?
Well, my dad was Portuguese and my mom was East Indian from Guyana.
Wow, okay. And you were talking about some of the suicide rates and things like that that are happening in different parts of the world as well as America. Can you elaborate just a little bit on that?
Yes, I've really been saddened by what I'm seeing around the world. I was invited in Guyana 2016 by 9 churches to speak on domestic violence and suicide prevention. And, we were able to talk to different audience and groups there. And young people came up to me afterwards and say, that's exactly what I'm dealing with. As I shared in the last video, my mom was a very hard worker, tried her best to provide it. And, let me make this very clear that if I had to walk in her shoes, I might not have done as good as she did. However, that does not minimize and ignore the severe pain and trauma that she caused unconsciously. The screaming, the hollering, the constant moodiness, and all the things that comes with not being conscious, and perhaps didn't know better how to change that. But clearly you could tell that she was a mother that cared about her children. But in a child's mind, it just doesn't match up. How could you love and yet cause so much pain?
Wow.
And so I believe that if we are conscious about how we're showing up in these areas in our lives, we can then present our best self to our children, because I want to write a book as well, How Not to Be a Public Success and a Private Failure. And I've had that title for quite a while. And obviously you don't get to share something unless you've experienced that.
Yes.
And we don't get to say that we've arrived. You're talking to someone that have been broken and wounded and didn't want to be alive. Thought of ways to end my life at 16 years old, and thought what type of purpose I have here, because my mom used to say something almost every day that I could remember. I wish I had aborted you and I had a chance to. I wish I had killed you. And she would use that word. And I know for so many moms and dad that's not what they're really saying, but because of life frustration and anger and rage and historic past, they are just coming from a place of woundedness. And that's what I want to address a little bit today. Are you walking around with a wounded child as an adult, or are you walking around with a healed, mature, safe adult for your children, for your grown children at every age and stage. How are you showing up? And for me, that was not accidental. In the last 18 years specifically, I've been very strategic in terms of saying, how do I want to show up and in my children's life? And you know, when my son was 1 year old, my oldest Josh was 1 year old, I was terrified. I was terrified, Damien, because I had this little person in my life, and I'm like, all I was accustomed to is someone screaming and hollering at me, but yet work hard and was gone 16 hours a day. So like I said, there is no judgment for any moms or dad out there. Is, do we want to show up differently? Do we want to stop the bleeding? Do we want to stop the pathology that keeps moving on and on? Do we want to interrupt, radically interrupt systems that doesn't serve us anymore? And do we want to have a safe, connected, healthy, balanced relationship with our children where they have the right to say to us, you've wounded me in this area, and how can we fix it?
Wow.
And that's the type of things that we want to share with people, because I've had to do that with my own 3 beautiful children. I have a daughter-in-law that's just amazing, and then 5 grandbabies. And so I'm like, God, help me to show up in a different way. So this is a journey we're taking together.
Absolutely. Yes. That's what a destiny shaper.
Absolutely.
You know, definitely shaping people's way of thinking mentally, physically, and spiritually. And yeah, I'm just excited, especially about what you're going to talk about today. And you sort of segue into it a little bit. But I just want to backtrack just for 1 second. You said that there were 9 churches that invited you out to speak to some women who had possibly been abused or going through abuse. What was that like when you were there?
We were invited to speak to the leadership of these 9 churches to make them aware about how do we stop the bleeding, at least in our sphere of influence, where the churches that they were responsible for. How do we interrupt patterns? And obviously, you can't do that in 8 or 10 days. You need more time. So we did a leadership summit first, where we had leaders, the elders, deacons, and so forth, come together, and we share openly about how do we stop this? What are the family systems that need to be interrupted? Because remember, I said in the last video, the mystery is always in the history.
Yes.
But having experience firsthand these young people that came up and said, this is the type of household I'm in, where my mom and dad is very domineering, controlling, and I can't speak my truth. I'm not allowed to be safe. And my daughter made a profound statement to me. She's 26, and I'm so honored to have her in my life because she's a dynamic 26-year-old, that wisdom above what I was at that age. And she says, somehow we think that little people don't have emotions and feelings, and they don't know how to communicate to us, hey, you're hurting me.
Right.
And by the way they look, by their body language, we need to pay attention to those things. So I'm grateful that I get to serve. I'm grateful that I get to show up with my family on Facebook and friends. I love you. I'm honored that you took the time to be here, and let's do this journey together. I need you.
Absolutely. One of the things I love about you is that you have a global mindset. You don't just think that the pain lies just in your culture, or the pain just lies in your community, or the pain just lies in somebody else's community. This is something that affects everyone. The topic that you're going to talk about a little bit today, you know, it just makes me think about how we just tend to project that. We project what has happened to us in the past onto our children, or even in our community, or even just our loved ones, our spouses. So you're going to talk a little bit about that. So I'm kind of anxious to get into it.
Thank you. Thank you, Damien.
So what was it that you felt that the Lord had revealed to you about this topic?
Well, he's been putting this on my heart for the last 18 years. And I had the amazing privilege of my brother that just passed was an alcoholic. He drank 7 days a week.
Wow.
My husband struggled with alcoholism. And in that, what God taught me 18 years ago is that it's easy to point finger at someone that it has a visible addiction. They're drinking, they're doing drugs. Some is sexing it away, some it's gambling it away, some it's spending it away, lying it away, raging it away, angering it away. It was easy for me to look at what was wrong with him and my brother and so forth. But what I had to do is to subject myself in a beautiful way to sit in AA, open AA meetings, Al-Anon, celebrate recovery. And when I went there 18 years ago, Damien, you know, I realized what a religious pig and judgmental person that I had become.
Wow.
Because now I call it the toxic church and toxic people. And these are precious ones that are unaware. No judgment, no pointing finger. I was one of those.
Wow.
And sitting in those rooms with 52 different people from all background walks of life, educated, non-educated, and realized that we were more alike than we were different. I love what you said earlier, Damien, that it's all culture, Buddha, Muslims, Hindus. It doesn't matter where we come from. We're more alike than we're different. And we come with these broken and wounded parts of us that needs to be fixed. And I want to ask people to radically take a look at how are you showing up with your children, your family, your neighbors, business associate. I have the privilege of running a company for 20 years, and God showed me, he said, every person that have worked for you end up leaving saying that my life has not been the same. So he said, I want you to name this destiny shaper, because every person that come in your sphere of influence, I want you to shape their lives for me. And wherever you come, background, it doesn't matter. I want to serve and to love you and to know there no judgment. So just challenging us to get it right. Get it right before we have to stand over our children's casket. Get it right before we have to stand over our moms and dad casket. And whether you're 16 or you're 85 or 90, are you teachable? Are you learnable? Are you changeable? Are we conscious to hear what our loved ones are saying? I remember my son, Michael, he's 30 years old. He says, Mom, when I'm with you, I don't want you on the phone. I don't want you to answer here and do this and do that. And I'm so grateful that he confronted me and my unawareness to say, am I present with you? Am I here with you? And so I just want us to be conscious.
Ah, that's so good. That is so good. I sit back and I think about how a lot of the things that happen in our youth affect us.
Absolutely.
You know, and usually those things that we know affect us are good memories. We know good memories affect us. You know, the first time you might have rode a bike, or with me, I like fast things. So four-wheeler, the first time I was on a four-wheeler, or roller skating, or things like that. But then also the things that are painful affect you.
Absolutely.
And we have a tendency sometimes to block that out. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, there's an awesome book that I've read, and I've had over 100 and something books that I have just inundate my mind with, and conferences, and just self-educate, because I didn't get to go to college. But I wanted to be radical in terms of my own transformation and want to work from the inside out. Not put the outside in one way and then inside is falling apart, right? How do we show up with our authentic self? And so, Demi, you asked a question, and I would greatly appreciate it if you could repeat what you just asked, because I want to capture that.
Well, it's the hurt, you know, that actually runs our life. So
Absolutely.
One of the things that I was thinking through, and you were sharing as well, is how that younger person running, that hurt person running your life now. So all of the good, you know, we remember that. You know, we can remember the first time you fell in love, or, you know, whenever you saw a great movie. You know, those are things that we can smile about. But what about the pain? You know, how can we examine ourselves and see if that young person that was hurt, that young child that was hurt, is now running our life now?
That's an awesome question, Damien. And I've noticed that in my own life, where when my kids were little, I used to get angry a lot with them. And I'm so grateful that I never stop and say, you know what, because of my past, because of what was happening to me, because of the abuse that I had to suffer. I had brothers that were very angry. The one that just passed was very abusive, extremely abusive. But we had so many times to say, I love you and I forgive you. Obviously, that was a wounded person running his life. I remember a year before he died, he said to me, you know, my mom was very abusive to me. And she would shame me and scream and holler and cuss me out as a child. And he said, I started drinking when I was 11. And he said, he said, my spouse is talking to me like that again. And what I want people to be conscious about is that if we don't stop to invest in our emotional, relational, mental, psychological health, we're going to attract those people, or we're going to become those people. So for me, the desperation came when I had this little person at 1 year old, 32 years ago. And then later, 4 years later, I had my second one, my Michael. And then 4 years later, I had my daughter that I prayed for, that I believed God for. So I was like, how do I show up in their lives that I'm not projecting the same things that happened to me? And how do I stop the bleeding? And so I want to really, really appeal to, it doesn't matter where you're from. If you have patterns that you know is not serving your children, interrupt that. So that you said one of the way we know that the wounded child is running our lives, the grown wounded child, they have different personality. So for instance, they can meet a pastor and they're like, hi pastor, how are you? I'm fine, you're fine, and we're all fine.
Right.
And so we have a public persona, a public face, but then we have a private face. And we're not careful how we show up with the people on the inside. And so I used to tell my children when they were growing up, we don't want to be silent in praise and loud in criticism. Right? And culturally, we would be quick to tell what's wrong, but we are not quick to say, I admire you, I appreciate you, I'm proud of you. So I remember when my kids were getting their report card growing up, I would look at the report card and I would point out all the grades that were not so good. And I would say, well, what happened here? And we would talk about the grades. And I was like, you know what? I know that can come up a little higher, but let's look at the ones that you did right. I really count there. Loud in praise and silent in criticism. And a lot of us think that we like a lot of us would have the thoughts that hey, I like you, I admire you, but we don't verbalize that. But what we verbalize is what we don't like. And it set up an atmosphere of resentment and rebellious. So I tell people, in order for us to correct anyone, we have to love and connect with them. Not on a surface level, but on an emotional, relational, psychological, and a mental way, where we're connecting with them so that they feel safe, even when they mess up. So Damien, the wounded child, one of the way we know we're walking around as a wounded child, personality splitting. We're one way here, we're one way in private, we're one way at work, and we're one way with different people. So we accommodate different relationships.
Wow.
But what in fact needs to be, how are we showing up for yourself? Are you willing to say that these are the things that I'm not willing to tolerate anymore? For me, 18 years ago, when I found out that my husband was secretly drinking and he got help and he's been dealing with that, is that what part did I play? I came from woundedness. My mom was drinking on the weekend, and that's how she coped. That was her coping mechanism. She was a wounded child, was married at 14 years old, and had to work and had to do the work of probably 5 people. And so there are no judgment on her, but how do we interrupt those things to say, I'm not going to excuse it away, minimize it away, say, they did this to me, so I'm going to do it again. No, how do we radically interrupt those patterns so we don't keep passing it down? And then when we get daughter-in-law or we get people to come into our family, we're like, I don't like them. I had to examine my own life to say, how did I contribute to that? And that's why I sat in the AA meetings. That's why I sat in the Al-Anon meeting. And that's why I went to Celebrate Recovery and spent thousands of dollars to say, what is it in me that needs to radically change? And I believe that, like Joseph in the Bible, obviously not comparing myself to him, but he had to be in school, the school of life, prison, falsely accused, betrayed, abandoned by his own family, so God can prepare him from the pit to the palace. Are you in the pit right now? God is preparing you for the palace. But how you handle that, are you reactive or are you proactive? And if we are proactive, we can create an atmosphere of safety for our loved ones that they want to change. But there are some people that no matter what you do, they're going to blame, shame, they're going to minimize, dismiss, and ignore. And I call denial, I'm lying, but I don't even know I am.
It's interesting. Wow, that's so awesome. One of the things that I hear you saying as well is that we all have coping mechanisms, and it's what is it that we are using to cope. And some might be drugs, some could be alcohol, some could even be sugar, when we've been hurt in the past, the things that we did to make us smile. And one of the things that when you're talking about Joseph, you think about his foundation was God, right? So that's one of the things that we need to turn to God to cope with what we're dealing with. So how do we recognize these coping mechanisms? So it's like you said before, it's easy to say that drinking because it's more outward, and we know that can lead to destruction, or maybe pornography may lead to destruction. But what about that person who just, they need a Snickers? Like they need the Snickers, they need the candy bar to make them feel happy, and they don't understand that is one of the coping mechanisms that's bringing that child, that hurt child out. So how does somebody deal with that?
Well, Damien, whenever we are dealing with any type of addiction, is the entire family is sick. It is not that person alone.
Wow.
So we have a sick family system that needs to be healed and changed. But in order for that to take place, we have to take ownership. We have to say, well, what part did I play, and how is it that I can make changes and then influence these changes around us? And like I stated, precious one out there, you might do all of that and still there are certain family members refuse to change. Like my brother that just passed, people often say to me, well, you miss him. I said, actually, I'm grateful that he's no longer hurting himself and hurting other people, right? Because I'm not the type to say, to make things look really great. He's already preached his eulogy. He's already told his story by the way he lived, by the way he showed up. And so I feel that if we stop to say, wait a minute, that person can't always, they're not all responsible. What part do we play? And that's the part, Damien, just like in the medical world, I tell people, you have all types of specialty. And those people go to school for years to become qualified. You cannot go to Kaiser or any of these big insurance company and say, I want to work as a doctor or a neurologist, gynecologist, psychologist, pathologist. You have to be trained. Well, why is it that we think it's any different for us when we're showing up relationally, emotionally, mentally, and psychologically and spiritually in our people's life, whether your children, your family, your brother, your sister, your workers, like I've had people to work with me. We need to stop and educate ourselves and be conscious about what is it going to take to become our best self, our authentic self. I don't want to show up with my phonies. I want to be real. And what you see I am in public is what I am in private, hopefully. The people that have been allowed to correct me the most, Damien, are my 3 children and my daughter-in-law. I give them permission. If you see anything that you don't like, Lisa, I've loved Lisa. Lisa's been with me for 7 years, known Lisa for 18 years. She's got the right to say, you might want to look at this. People that are close to us, I have a coach that I've been coaching with for 13 years. I have a therapist that I've been seeing because I need help. I need to know that I'm not full of myself, because that can happen easily.
Oh, yeah.
We can be full of ourselves and we spiritualize it. And I love what Lisa Nichols says. She's one of my mentors. I've been honored and grateful to be in her tribe, to be a part of it, her organization, Stephen Arterburn, New Life. That's been one of my mentors. That's been somebody that I adore for the last 25 years. And you know, like Lisa said, we dress our excuses up with sexy and glitters. And I've known, I've done that in the past too as well. And I have to catch myself still, because I can still do that. Right. I can still dress my sexy with my excuses with glitters and with you know, with all these nicety, you know, but I can't, you know, we don't know when we will take our last breath. Right. So do we want to govern with our wounded self or our healed self? The second thing, Damien, that we know the wounded self is running our life is that we're not developing our true self. We don't pay attention to what the hurt and the woundedness has caused us. We're not aware to say, you know what? Why am I blowing up at this time? Why am I getting so angry? Why am I raging on the road? Why am I depressed? Why do I give everything out to my boss, but when I come in, I have zero to give to my family? I'm in the iPod, I'm in the TV, I don't know how to connect in a healthy, balanced way. It's you do this, but no authentic laughter or connection. So when you have the false self running your life, you're not a very wise, effective leader. Because one of the things that we're seeing, Damien, is a lot of precious people that have raised their kids in private school and have different organizations they've been a part. They're like, what happened to my child? Why are they picking the people they're picking? Why don't they want nothing to do with what I stand for? What are those things? Well, they see two different people.
That's good.
They see one person showing up here and another showing up here. And like I said, this is a journey I hope that we would be willing to take, especially to all the precious people from different countries, even here. We want to stop the bleeding. Our federal prisons are filled. You know, you see the amount of drugs, the killing, the suicide, and all of that. They're all historic. The mystery is in the history. The third thing that happened when you're wounded, you have excessive shame and guilt. You're always driven by guilt and shame. You know, it's not where your authentic self. You know, when I mess up, I can say, God, you know, I mess up. Would you forgive me? I can go to people and say, hey, I messed up. I missed the mark. You know, I go to Lisa when we have something with a company and I say, you know what? I missed that totally. I'm sorry. You know, I can apologize to my grown children to say, you know, I wasn't really aware or self-aware. My granddaughter always says, Grandma, are you self-aware? Her dad is teaching her how to be self-aware. And so I said, Anna, Grandma wasn't self-aware. One day we were at the restaurant, Damien, and Sarah was still in the car, my daughter coming out, and she was holding the door for Sarah. And she said, Grandma, you are not being self-aware. I said, really? What is Grandma doing? She said, you didn't hold the door for Auntie Sarah. You were just not self-aware. I said, you know what, Anna, you're absolutely right. But how many different places in our lives are we not self-aware? How many places? The fourth thing, the fourth thing that we see when we're wounded, excessive fear. We live a fear-based life. Wow. And I have the T-shirt. I don't know if you could see the visible T-shirt. Everything I used to they were all fear, and it wasn't from a place of wholeness and a place of confidence in God and my ability to do the right thing in terms of ask for what I want. So a fear-based life shows up you feel fear about the unknown, pain about your past, pain about your future. You're isolated. You fail in certain area that you want to succeed. You feel abandoned. You feel fear of success, fear of relationship, fear of being more connected, fear of being intimate. That's the wounded child that is running our lives. Wow. So we want to interrupt that. And the other one, another word for woundedness, we distort the truth. We are not living in reality. We say things like, oh, he just drink on the weekend and he just get drunk now and then. He got a couple of DUI and, you know, he just have multiple sexual partners that he's sexing his life away. And, you know, that's not a big deal. Significance, distortion of of self, and we live in denial. And remember what I said about denial is that I'm lying and don't even know I am. So what is it that we want to interrupt? We project our hurt on other people. So we get triggered at the workplace, we get triggered on the road, we get triggered our children, we get triggered with everything because the wounded child is still governing our lives. The adult, mature self will say, hey, that person is not responsible. We call the phone company and we want to cuss them out. We want to scream at them. Somebody don't show up right at the restaurant. We want to take the food. We are super reactive than proactive. And so we have a trail of wounded relationship that we are never going back to fix. So God started dealing with me in the last 18, 20 years to say, are you reactive or proactive? Mm-hmm. And I had to take ownership. And it's a journey. We never arrive until we take our last breath. But I want to make sure that we are showing up in a way that people want to be around us. When you get older and your children have to take care of you, do you want them to tolerate you or celebrate you? Mm. Do you want them to say that I'm excited that you're my mom and dad? Or do you want them to say, well, whatever, it's an obligation?
Mm. That's good. That's good. You got one more?
I have two more, Damien.
Two more?
So the wounded child that's running the adult life is trust issue. I don't trust them. They might rob me. I don't trust them. They might cheat me. I don't trust them because you know what? They are not trustworthy. But we end up trusting the wrong people. And because